Okay, so we're gonna start up where we left off on page 23 of Gaia's Retribution. We're still doing the mind control patents. So we're on US 5899867A, System for Self-Administration of Electroencephalograph Neurofeedback Training, a system for self-administered monitoring, displaying, analyzing, and recording of electrical activity of the brain provides indications of brain activity and a corresponding mental state of a user. A plurality of visual, auditory, and tactile feedback mechanisms are integrated with the presentation of control and notification indications to facilitate neurofeedback training of the user. The operational interface and sequencing are provided in such a manner as to provide the ability to the user to record, manage, and control brain activity for different purposes. The initial trials of all these patents stem from work done during World War II. Nazi scientists experimented on prisoners. MK Ultra never ended. It just became something different. It just has a different name. They detail an example of the use of this patent would be for self-improvement and peak performance of the individual the patent is being used on. In that case, we would have a whole society full of people just benefiting from government patents, succeeding and flourishing due to them, which is what the government wants to paint a picture of. In reality, this patent is used to degrade the individual, making performance nearly impossible and not allowing for any improvement. These patents lead into protocols that are all aimed at keeping individuals in line in the system. In the case that they step out, these patents are used for torture methods, all of them. There are 52 more patents under the original patent for altering consciousness, all detailing how they can manipulate your perception. They can alter how stimuli go in, how you interpret it, and how you respond to it. If they are manipulating your hearing, they can introduce voices into your consciousness in order to either manipulate your behavior or drive you mad. They can heal your body. If they can heal your body, they have the counter frequencies to destroy your body. Being able to manipulate you physiologically means your feelings and emotional responses are programmed. If they can put you in a state of REM after inducing sleep, they can keep you from achieving REM or sleeping at all ever. In the case that they were using any of these behavioral modification protocols for good, we would be living in a perfect world right now. US 5036858A, Method and apparatus for changing brainwave frequency. Worldwide application 1990. US 104-85972B2. Apparatuses and methods for neuromodulation. Worldwide application 2016. US 7769439B. Brain balancing by binaural beat. Worldwide application 2005. US 5356368A, Method of and apparatus for inducing desired states of consciousness. Worldwide application 1991. US 9480812B1, Methodology, system, use, and benefit of neuroacoustic frequencies for assessing and improving the health and well-being of living organisms. Worldwide application 2010. There are more and more patents detailing how they alter you and your world and how your entire existence in that world is programmed. Some are in Chinese, some in Russian, but all are more and more hard to swallow. We are detailed as subjects, specimens, in a massive experiment where our experiences, our feelings, our bodies, our minds, our consciousnesses are manipulated into a false version of reality that isn't reality at all. If this reality is so heavily programmed, what other realities are they so desperately trying to keep up from us? If the government had been using all this consciousness manipulation for good, we wouldn't have murder or mayhem. We would have peace and harmony. If they can heal people through frequencies, why are people dying of illnesses and diseases that they've created? If dental procedures can be painless, why are we being pumped full of Novocaine for procedures? It's because even this has mind control in it. If a bariatric oxygen chamber could cure cancer and insurance doesn't cover it, they pump people full of poison. What else were they hiding from us? Ronald Reagan is on record stating that the 9 scariest words in the English language are, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." It speaks volumes that the government is never here to help. Why are there pharmaceutical industries thriving if there are patents to heal the body through neuroacoustic frequencies? If they can heal you, they can use alternate frequencies to destroy you, and that's exactly what the intent is, to make the system as lucrative as possible, and to keep anyone who disagrees down enough so that they couldn't make enough waves to enlighten the populace due to illness, torture, and eventual insanity. The creation of this machine began during World War II. The Nazis used their prisoners to test out all of these ideas and made them into a reality for the populace of today. The Nazi regime is still in power today, and all your freedoms are an illusion. The Germana Nordum became Illuminati, and the Illuminati became the governing party overall, with the Masonry. That's part of the Masonry. The Thule Society became a club for the upper crust. I hypothesized that the outfit that Klaus Schwab is donning, in the black and gray, the large necklace are today's Thule Society robes, and what I call a ridiculous costume for a true clown. Look at your reality completely programmed. How would you even know if the entities that have signed with How would you even know if the entities they have signed with were implanting you with more technology, or even using you for implantation of progeny while you sleep? Would you even know if you are being taken, and if they don't even have to take you anywhere? Have they given them the rights to come down and have their way with you in the comfort of your own home? If all these patents are being used on you with the absence of alien intervention, at this point, what is a home? Even with the absence of alien intervention, at that point, what is a home? Would you even know if you were already hooked up to a machine and your home is just a simulation? I am the balance between worlds, yet there seemingly hasn't been a balance in place for a long time. Elites have run the show, toting their blue blood status and inbreeding to keep all their wealth within the family, and these Illuminati families and papal bloodlines function in secrecy. When I shut my eyes as a girl, I saw children in crates, bondage, and thought it was just my way of accepting that life was worse elsewhere for other people. Terrifyingly enough, this is how the elites keep their power, trafficking young children through underground tunnels until they are fed up into adrenochrome farms, where the elites can stay rejuvenated with the blood of tortured children. I believe this is how reptilians keep their form. There are underground tunnels where reptilians feed off of children, and the government feeds them these children. I couldn't have imagined that what I was seeing was real because of how cruel and vicious my visions were. I never knew that there was a possibility that my visions were real, or that I was a part of any kind of government conspiracy, but now I've found myself at the center of it all, crying for harmony, balance, and prosperity for all. I had spent so much time trying to fit into the system, I failed to see that I was the one who could bring the system down. The system seemed to want my demise at a young age. I was touched by an extended family member at the age of 4. The day replayed in my mind all the way up through my 20s. I would dream of the crisp autumn air and the damp leaves under my tiny Mary Janes. We would go to a creek near a playground where I would hop stones and get wet. He would send away my male cousins with my brother and place me on the jungle gym, taking off my wet stockings from the waist down. I would black out and wake up. He would keep eye contact the entire time. It was as if it was a movie that got caught on a reel. I do believe it only happened once, but as a child I would think all older men were supposed to touch me. I would have visions of it, even though they didn't. There seemed to be a tie between men wanting me and worth. I wanted to be desired, and by the time I was 5 years old, I was masturbating. I became afflicted early on in my childhood when I prayed to God to give me the pain of my family because I was already so sick I knew I could handle more. I just didn't realize that all of you are my family. I prayed to be desired by all men and to be beautiful at the detriment of my health, if needed. This was to whomever was placating as God at the time, for you will come to see that there are many entities that clamor for clout but do not have the mercy or love to be the one true God. This is where the Bible becomes an astral treasure map to be decoded for the game of all games, the God games, where powerful entities fight for the right to be the one and only God. It is no game, and it is no secret to them that Mother Nature is the goddess, God of all gods, the mother of all, and the great virgin creator. After I prayed at around the age of 6, I fell incredibly ill. I would have pain so bad in my stomach that I would sleep in my bathroom by the toilet. I was still incredibly young and rarely got any sleep. I would vomit up an oily substance along with bile and lie on the cold floor because I would be sweating out the pain. My stomach would distend as if I were pregnant, and I would go to the doctors every 2 weeks complaining of body pain and stomach issues, and would be sent away with nothing conclusive every time. They didn't seem to know how to help me or didn't care. At 16, my doctor would take me aside and tell me I was a pretty girl, and she didn't know why I felt the need for such negative attention. I believe all along they thought I was just faking it for attention. I was still a little girl when I awoke in my room to a metallic sphere floating at the end of my bed. This was not a dream, although I tried to write it off as one. It just hung there, looking like like Mercury on the surface of a planet. I sat for a long while just staring at it before lying down and going back to sleep. I never brought it up to anyone as I thought I was dreaming. I now believe I was staring at a planet or a portal. I acquired Lyme's disease at the age of 7 years old and became even more difficult, and things became even more difficult for me. Lyme's was made at Plum Island, a government facility aimed at creating diseases for the government to treat. The island of Dr. Moreau was based on it, and their human-animal hybrids had the attention of conspiracy theorists when the bodies started washing up on their shores. My nervous system was targeted, and I found simple tasks daunting as it was under constant attack. I wasn't given doxycycline, but another drug, which barely got rid of it, and I would suffer later in life due to its long-term effects. I was so sick I could barely go to school, yet I loved learning, nonetheless. Learning how to do research was key for me in my salvation. Knowledge is power, as they say, or key in my freedom. By first grade, I was protesting the national anthem because the schools had brought God into the mix, and there are laws about separating education from religion. My grandparents were survivors of the Holocaust. My grandmother's parents stayed behind when the Nazis came for them. She was sent away in a covered caravan which tipped over into a freezing river during their escape. Their parents didn't come in order to serve as a distraction. They dug their own graves while they sent the children of the town away. She survived along with one small child, and they fled into the woods. The Nazis caught up to them and pried the child away from her, leading them to their slaughter. My grandmother was sent to a working camp in Siberia. Her bedmate froze to death from not working one day, as they didn't feed her, and she had to sleep next to that body before they removed it, just to throw the body into a mass gravesite. She was able to get out and met my grandfather, but the nightmare stayed with her. My grandmother was never really able to snap out of it. She was a mournful person, rarely able to smile, and spoke mostly Polish to my father. We would go and visit her, and she always had special cookies for us. She would cry in the doorway every time we left. My grandfather had died of Parkinson's when I was young, so we were really all she had, with the exception of my uncle. My grandpa was a happy man despite what the Nazis had done to him. I once watched a documentary on Dybbuk boxes. It was said that many of the young Jewish girls got into witchcraft during the war. A group of Polish girls recounted Kristallnacht, the Night of Clarity, in a documentary, and had done a spell to trap demons in a box. These boxes were known as Dybbuk boxes. They believed demons were behind the war, and I remember finding it interesting. I didn't fully believe in demons at the time. I thought, moreover, people were just power hungry, and being a Nazi soldier gave them the power they so desperately craved to dictate life and death over another person. I didn't even believe in witchcraft at the time either. I was more a child of logic. I willfully ignored the existence of magic, spirits, and demons because I was terrified of the idea, and it suited me better to walk blindly through life, not just ignoring the signs, but completely forgetting about them, as this is what happens when you get older and start to adult. All the psychic abilities and knowledge start to fade away, and as the education system pumps you full of scientific-based explanations for everything and ignores the spiritual realm completely. So the Aryans were indigo children, I believe, and that's what it was based on. Was they chose the indigo children, which are like alien blood, to demon possess and use as soldiers, because they were actually, I think the indigo children are actually more empathic, so they try to plague them and make them into soldiers through demon possession. My father's family were survivors of the communist occupation. My grandparents were eventually able to make a suitable home for themselves after they were able to get out of the camp when they were liberated. The communists ran them out, claiming claiming their home as headquarters, and the family then fled to Israel. My dad loves the warm weather and the heat because he lived in the desert for a period as a child before coming over to the States. Our family used to frequent Jamaica and saw the downfall of its people to the hierarchy. The oceans were bare by the time I reached my 20s, and the people didn't care as long as they were being fulfilled. The reefs were empty, and fish for food source became scarce because of this. People would take back trinkets from the reefs, therefore killing them and disrupting the fragile balance of that ecosystem for something that would most likely end up in the garbage one day. Pieces of the reef lose their color as they lose their life. Conch was my favorite island food. The small restaurants were suffering under the ordinances in place that were trying to limit the amount of conch being served, which were becoming endangered by the moment, and had been a staple food source. The people of the beach hawked the shells while the restaurants sold off their insides to the tourists until there wasn't enough conch in the ocean anymore. Around 9/11 is when it all came to a halt. The people of the island could not flourish without the tourist industry. Beach resorts wouldn't even let the people pass by for fear that their sale and trade would reflect poorly on their image of a hidden hideaway. The fishermen hunted alone and were affected deeply, afraid that their fishing spots would be revealed as the people of the beach tried to desperately keep afloat, selling island trinkets and carvings. They began poor and just got poorer. I saw the Europeans buying up land in quantity and the Indians opening up shop in the sale of duty-free goods, encroaching on any chance that the Jamaican people had to flourish. My father taught me how to dance from a young age. I always felt sick for no reason and would dance it off just to make myself feel better. He would cook. Later in life, I would learn to cook just from the smell of certain foods from our weekends in the kitchen. We would go to live music on the island and dance our hearts out. We fell in love with Earth under the mescaline sun and danced beneath the blanket love light of the moon cascading on the shores. We went on vacation every few weekends when I was a kid, into my early teens with family friends. We spent long weekends at Broadkill Beach in Delaware, Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, or at Piseco Lake, New York. We were all very close and functioned like family. I learned very early on if I wanted any privacy or relief, I needed to go for walks on my own. I would walk the stretch of beach in Delaware, throwing back as many horseshoe crabs that had washed up on shore on the beach as possible. I would walk the cemetery across the street from their house in Pennsylvania, keeping the spirits company and reading headstones as I walked the grounds. I would walk the shore of the lake in Piseco. There was an influx of monarch butterflies there feeding on milkweed, and we used to collect them and bring them back home with us and set them free. I seemed to always be walking. One day I got lost in the cornfields at dusk in Mechanicsburg, and no matter which direction I went, I ended up at the same clearing. I was terrified. It reminded me of the movie In the Tall Grass, where people got stuck in some kind of loop and never got out. I figured out the government organization run games on people like this. It is very reminiscent of Cabin in the Woods. They can manipulate everything around you, I assume using binary code, which is the universal code they use. They can awaken cryptids if they do so desire and watch your frustration turn demise for entertainment. The powers that be are all gambling addicts and program reality around a system that allows for this kind of treatment. They think of us as small, but if not for all the divisions, we could rise up against them, changing the system, in the case that the system gets exposed, which I'm trying to do here. That's what I believe. I believe that there might be some kind of Cabin in the Woods, like NSA, cryptid, like they're able to do something like that through this synthetic reality and introduce cryptids into scenarios and have betting pools on the survival of the participants. And it's like sacrifices to the old gods. That's what I believe they do. I'm not 100% on that, but I think that's what they do. I cried a lot when I was in my teens. It was sad. I had a hard time with everything. I didn't know what to do with myself most of the time. I would just sit up in my room and cry. I would have massive panic attacks from the littlest of things. I was in pain all the time. I didn't understand why I was the way I was. I just knew I was different. I felt pain everywhere. I was feeling the pain of the earth inside me, the pain of the multiverse. I remember waking up and my body feeling like it was broken regularly. The pain was always so bad I never wanted to do anything, but I followed in everything everyone else was doing. I had a hard time keeping up, but never told anyone about it. There were 2 boys in the family and 1 girl, and as kids we would rip on each other if there was complaining or if we exhibited any traits that made you look incapable or weak. I learned how to be strong from them and shrug off pain. I maintained my pride and kept up with whatever we were doing for the day, even if it involved just fighting with each other. We messed with each other a lot and we loved each other. It wasn't malicious. It was just how we were. I worked from an early age doing babysitting and then at the Renaissance Fair, which harbored what was much like carnival people. For some reason, carnival culture always reminded me of a little bit of the beach culture in Jamaica. Sex involving underage girls and older men was normal at the fair and on the beach, as the adult males were all over the new females that started there. On the beach, you started getting hit on by adult males at the age of 11. I was 15 years old when I started at the fair, and it was normal to be hit on by patrons and rennies alike. The rennies, which was what we called the people who worked there, partied by night and worked by day, and drugs were a big part of the scene. I didn't know it, but around the age of Ronald Reagan, the CIA took part in selling drugs to the masses, having made crack out of cocaine that was coming out from Colombia. There was a time where those same drugs got caught on the island of Jamaica, and the poor people of the country became even poorer drug addicts. They synthesized the cocaine into crack and gave it to Jamaicans, and it became much more dangerous. It was all part of a degradation feeding degradation to no avail. It was all part of a master plan and what I would consider the making of zombies through drug addiction, one of the early phases of the zombie apocalypse. We went sailing regularly as a family. The water always calmed me. Anything where I felt where I was being cradle rocked, I enjoyed, including the long drives we took on trips. We even went cross country twice when I was young, once when I was 7 years old and another time when I was 13. We went to Mount Rushmore, where I saw the heads of the Illuminati members, George Washington, or the Masonry. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Theodore Roosevelt, and Abraham Lincoln. All presidents are part of the Illuminati, even this far back in time. I believe that this has all been at play far before the British even colonized here. Isn't it interesting there are 13 fallen angels, 13 stripes on the flag, 13 colonies that Britain started, and 13 Illuminati dynasties, and 13 papal bloodlines? Nothing is ever a coincidence. We went to the Colorado Rockies and had a snowball fight in the middle of summer. We went to Old Faithful and the Badlands, amongst other places. The sulfur pits were one of my favorite spots. They are a brilliant blue. The smell of sulfur is just so thick in places you can barely breathe. We videotaped twisters happening on our way out, and I would stay up all night with my dad and sleep all day in the back seats. I remember I always listened to a tape that was a collection of spooky Halloween sounds. I would dream of witches in a cave where they would abduct me and a lover and strap us down and pleasure us nearly to death using tools on us that bordered on genital mutilation. I wasn't sexually active until later in my teens, so I knew nothing of what it would feel like to have someone touch me if it weren't for these visions. There were always 3 witches that would play with me while I was in bondage. I never actually got into bondage, but I would nearly orgasm from the visions and dreams as if they were actually happening. It was all very real. I could feel everything. This was all training in order to mold my mind around certain sexual tendencies in the future, being BDSM related, which I never took to. Chapter 2. In my teen years, I suffered from mind-blowing headaches and later urinary tract infections. I used to have some sort of sediment come out of my urethra into the toilet with pieces of my tract on them. The doctors began giving me painkillers at the young age of 17. I remember I was one of the people who used to go around saying billionaires ran the world. They needed to keep me distracted from flourishing, so there was much illness present in my life. I personally didn't know any difference and thought other people had pain like I did until I was about 19 years old. I never knew that humans had it so good until I became aware that not everyone had headaches, let alone severe body pain I suffered from. The severe body pain I suffered from. I did, however, live my life to the fullest, having made sure I went out as much as I could and saw a lot of live music of all kinds. My father was very into taking us to concerts, so I was exposed to a lot of that at a young age. By the time I was in my early 20s, I had been to almost 200 concerts. I had started looking for a partner early on in life. When I wasn't with anyone, sexual harassment was typical when I went out. Everyone seemingly looking for sex was a constant in a world where I merely wanted to find a connection. I didn't know yet just how different from everyone else I was. I had my first boyfriend when I was 17 years old, after my first dog had died. Hershey passed away while we were in Jamaica. I never really got over the fact that he died in a cage in a kennel and not home with us. It broke my heart, and I searched elsewhere to fulfill the hole that his absence left. Some kind of companionship, as dogs are the best companions you could ever have. Hardcore was the funniest person I ever met and the most emotionally disturbed. We will call him hardcore on account of the kind of music he listened to. Any night Hardcore wasn't at my house, he would yell at me until the wee hours of the morning, chastising me for every little thing. I didn't know at the time that he was mentally ill, and when he started doing drugs, everything seemed to be my fault, even his lack of erections. He eventually robbed the mall that he worked at and tried to get me to come there to give him a hug, the scene of the crime. While I was on the phone with him, he shouted out, "I think I'm gay." I decided to stay my ass home instead of getting caught on cameras in the parking lot pulling up to a crime scene. He showed up the next day with 11 30-gallon garbage bags full of stuff. He came to me and told me he was going to turn himself in and make a big production of everything. It was insane. I left him after that, and he went out with my friends to try and get me back. He did everything he could except to be rational about the situation. At one point, I went to his house to check on him, and he took out a straight razor and began running it along his wrists. I ran outside to leave. I wasn't dealing with his shit anymore, and he jumped on the hood of my car. Ridiculous just got more ridiculous, and I avoided him as much as possible thereafter. I initially went to college at SUNY Oneonta and was in a dormitory with 3 other girls. They called me mom and love-bombed me in the beginning before they began taking turns talking about each other. My turn came up, and I wasn't willing to accept friends that discussed me behind my back, as I found that they talked about me to our pod dealer. It must be a female thing, as I encountered the same thing in high school at around 10th grade, but I was relatively good at picking friends who didn't gossip. Did you know there's some hormone in the female mind that triggers a pleasurable feeling when gossiping? I never knew this growing up, nor understood it. I never talked about people behind their backs because I always felt someone, somewhere, was always listening. I didn't stand for it, and I made it known. They all packed my posters and things up and refused to even use the common area, all staying in one room with the new roommate they picked, who later contacted me after they were through with her, telling me she never should have moved in with them and should have taken something from my experience. I took a class there, Philosophical Ideas in Imaginative Lit. It was my favorite class, as we read sci-fi books like Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula Le Guin that delved into Alice in Wonderland. The professor told us the story of Charles Ludwig Dodgson, or Lewis Carroll. He took vacations in New England at the same spot as this family with 3 little girls, Alice being the youngest. He would draw pictures of them in the nude, as this was considered to be artwork back then, and did so with their parents' permission. I envisioned in my head when he told this story like a movie playing. I would see the beach, the rocks, the water, the house, everything. He would spend all his free time with Alice and her curious mind, and that's where the influence for his book came from. When she was 9 years old, he asked the parents if he could marry her when she turned 11 years of age, and the family never came back. I assume Alice in Wonderland was based on her navigating the world with him, and Through the Looking Glass was written after he lost her due to its dark nature. I was tasked in class with rewriting any part of one of the pieces we examined with philosophical attributes. I rewrote the Jabberwocky. The Jabberwocky was a sort of monster in Through the Looking Glass. I rewrote it as a monster being a forest that Alice had to go through. The forest was alive with all her fears, and the only way out was to follow her reflection in the stream that ran through it, because everyone's most true fear is looking into themselves. It would morph you into what you were most afraid of, the monster inside. or your true self. Most people fear things irrationally, but what they really should be afraid of was what they're truly capable of. She was the spirit of a child, so the stream showed her just her reflection. There was nothing lurking inside of her, and she found she had nothing to fear. She followed it through the woods and was set free in the end, and was more powerful than ever because of it. After my freshman year, I transferred to SUNY Albany and pursued 2 degrees, one in psychology and the other in communications. I had a steady boyfriend who was my first real love. I rarely slept at night. My significant other was in a fraternity that had a house near the apartment building I lived in. I lived in the student ghetto where poverty reigned. You couldn't even trust buying marijuana from someone randomly, as they would put crack in it in order to get you hooked on their product. A customer for life. I lived with my best friend for 2 years. I was living in a place where they would put recovering drug addicts unbeknownst to me. It was called the student ghetto. Poor people were mixed in with the students. It was the perfect storm for mayhem, as it seemed you could get away with anything there. That was part of its appeal. I didn't mind, as I felt I was surrounded by crazy people no matter what. In that poverty-stricken area. The super there had it bad for my best friend and brown teeth. He was a crackhead that lived at the very end of a Texas Chainsaw Massacre-like tunnel behind the laundry room. There was a wild lesbian ex-crackhead that used to roam the halls of the building in a large t-shirt and little slip-ons, and my roommate and I would toss a coin for who was going to the vending machine when we would get high. Another person in our building would try and speak to us out front as we made our way to school and scream out, "You fucking whores, you fucking bitches," as we walked away because we didn't have time to stop and chat. We would just laugh. That was before our relationship completely deteriorated due to me having a boyfriend. John, my boyfriend, told me to shut the fuck up early on, as I love to talk, and I developed a nonverbal way of speaking to him in the beginning. As I wasn't able to communicate, I felt shot down. I would go for long walks to get out the anxiety instead of speaking to him. And part of me felt like he didn't deserve to hear my voice after telling me to shut up the first time. He told me I couldn't go into the other brothers' rooms, and that's where I had spent all my free time beforehand. He had slept with his best friend's ex-girlfriend before they got back together, and that should have shown me what kind of person he was. They all stayed in the first Halloween while we were together and filmed a porno. It was far beyond my pay grade, and I thought of leaving him, but I had such high hopes. It was devastating, and the girl would go into the house and linger at his doorway. I would even catch her in there sometimes, and I didn't understand why he was making rules for me but not following them any himself. I looked the other way about his photograph with Mike Tyson, a known rapist, because I knew he loved to collect pictures of himself with famous people. But it always rubbed me the wrong way morally. Why were celebrities not held to the same esteem as regular people when it came to crimes? It was a very confusing time for me, and I felt my judgment was being tested all the time. I would come to feel that way all the time in my early adulthood before becoming too sick to even get out of bed. So my first boyfriend, I believe, was possibly, since I ended up realizing that I was being hunted all the time, he was possibly Kapar, using his body. It was possibly because we are used as containers by aliens and other beings. And I found out later that he was possibly Kapar, the fallen angel that makes women fall in love with men. I distinctly remember dreams of tunnels beneath the university while I was going to school and secret societies. Fraternities used to function in secrecy. Skull and Bones and Code of the Bull's Blood are 2 that are still secret to the world. Skull and Bones played a role in the making of the atomic bomb and indoctrinated the likes of George Bush Jr. and George Bush Sr. I heard part of their initiation ritual involves a casket and all the brothers urinating on you. I hear the Bush family are Illuminati powerhouses, so this gives you an idea of what kind of people are in power today. John was in a fraternity. I always thought the process of being hazed to be stupid, as how can you consider people who tormented you to be your friends and brothers? But they welcomed me. They didn't have many hot girls who hung out with them, but I like to think it was because I was really cool. John and I would go to concerts together. On a couple occasions, he would leave me out to go backstage to meet the band. I recall one time when we saw Rat Dog that he left me out there so long the venue was closing. There was a snowstorm outside and they almost tossed me out on my ass. One of the workers came up to me multiple times to talk about what a douche he must have been to have left me waiting alone all that long with no regard for me whatsoever. This was also while I had mono. So it was just no little regard for my well-being at all. Another time we went to go see Matt's Yahoo together and I had a midterm in the morning. I told him I needed to be home by 1:30 a.m. to get some sleep. We went to the Armory and the concert was great. Matt's Yahoo was davening with fans after the show. I saw a woman go up to him and try and shake his hand and he curled it up and recoiled. I was insulted for her. I had gone to Shabba's house one night and the rabbi did the exact same thing to me when I went to shake his hand, except he turned his back on me and walked away. If you want someone to accept your religion, then try explaining to them why they can't touch you instead of treating them like some sort of pariah. I waited for a while for John to take me home, but he didn't budge. Davening wasn't something he did regularly, but he wasn't leaving with me, and it was obvious. I finally ended up walking home alone in a rainstorm in downtown Albany, which was crime central. He never even apologized for it, nor acknowledged it. Another time he was working at a radio station as a promotions director, and he could have easily taken me to meet Grace Potter and the Nocturnals, but instead left me outside alone waiting again for over an hour. And I had driven upstate after school to go to the show with him and spend time with him. I always felt optional and dispensable with him. We're on chapter 3, so I will come back and read more later. Thank you for listening.